Yes, so now we look at the wasteland. So the wasteland was published in the year.
1922.
Yes, wasteland was published. Sorry, in 1920. Sorry. Yes, the wasteland was published in 1922 alongside Ulysses, and both Ulysses and the wasteland have said to have been the awake of modernism, and more so the wasteland is called as the awake of the is said to have begun what is called as modernist poetry. So it marks the awake of modernist poetry. You have a total of 433 lines in the wasteland, and the wasteland is nothing but it's about the degradation of this society, or in simple terms, it's about the decline of civilization. And when you look at the wasteland, you realize that he's talking about the modern man, the predicament of the modern man, who is torn apart by spiritual, intellectual, and moral disturbances. So man is neither spiritual nor intellectual nor moral. So he doesn't have any of these so-called virtues in the modern times. And also it talks about the impossibility of recovering meaning in life. So it's technically about how there's meaninglessness in life. There is a state of libido that exists during the modern times. Now, libido is when people live in isolations. There's the sense of alienation. People live in isolation, and I told you about how people during modern times didn't know who was living next door, and even if a person died next door, they only could find it out by way of the piling up of milk bottles outside the house, the neighbor. So that's the state of libido, and this all happened precisely post the World War. And of course, 1919 is when the World War ended. It started in 1914 and it ended in 1919. So, when the poem was published in 1922, it was precisely the post war period. And the earlier title of the poem, the earlier title, He Do the Police in Different Voices. So, this was the alternative title of Wasteland, and this title is from Dickens's Our Mutual Friend. Yes, I'm actually in my grandfather's place and my grandparents are talking to each other. I'm sorry. Yes, so the
It's
earlier
fine. It's
title
fine.
was He Do the Police in Different Voices, and this is from Dickens's Our Mutual Friend. And please look at other works that were also published alongside Wasteland in 1922. And another important year is the year when T.S. Eliot received the Nobel Prize. When was it?
1940, no?
1940?
8, 47.
Are you sure?
No, 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 1948.
Anybody else with any other answer?
46.
46, who's that?
I, me. 1946, I think.
The others?
46, 47, 48, 49.
He received the Nobel Prize in the year 1948, 1 year after India's independence.
Yeah, yeah, that's why I told you no 19. I also learned it like that. 1 year after India's independence, 1948.
Yes, ma'am, but you're supposed to be sure of your answers. That's why
Yes,
I asked you.
yes, right. I know. I also learned it like that. 1 year after India's independence.
Yes. So this work was initially longer than 433 lines, and it was edited by Ezra Pound, who is an imagist. And therefore, T.S. Eliot dedicates the Wasteland to Ezra Pound. He says, Il miglior fabbro, meaning the better craftsman.
A better craftsman.
Yes. Now, talking about the Wasteland, the influences on T.S. Eliot. So, it was largely influenced by phrases, the Golden Book. We'll discuss in detail about this work when we talk about archetypal criticism. And another important influence was Jesse Weston's,
From ritual to
yes,
romance.
From Ritual to Romance. And throughout the poem, you find, and of course, there was also the influence of Bhagavad Gita, the Vedas. So he was influenced by both West and Eastern thought. And if you look at the poem, throughout the poem, you find a tussle between the ancient, the modern, moral, and immoral. So it's full of broken images where nothing makes sense. And this tool of using broken images is itself indicative of the modern society. And you have an epigraph. Epigraph is anything that is terse and that's epigrammatic and it is used at the beginning of a work. So here it begins with an epigraph which is from a Latin and Greek origin. It's written in Latin and Greek, and it is from the satricon of Petronius. Yes, so this is the epigraph of T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. Now we move on to talk about the various sections in the Wasteland. What is the first section?
The burial of the dead.
Yes. Yes, and if in case you have the poem with you, you can open the poem.
Don't have the poem now.
Yes, on your phones or somewhere.
Okay, okay.
Done?
Ah, yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes, now if you look at the poem, it actually begins with a description of a season, which is spring season. It starts with April is the cruelest month, where April is indicative of the onset of spring season. Now he calls April to be the cruelest month because it brings back both memory and desire. Memory of all things that people will probably tend to forget. But this spring is the season that brings back your old memories. And then sooner it shifts to a memory which is of a young girl who's playing. The narrator, he talks about his times in Munich where he's playing with his uh, playing slides and rides with his uh, relatives and friends and cousins. Yes, and soon after this whole recollection, he talks about, it's actually about Murray. And after this recollection, he goes on to talking about uh, a hyacinth girl. Now, this Hyacinth Girl passage is again another very important passage which shows how the girl is actually holding flowers. She's got drenched in the rain and she's wet now, and it talks about the physical beauty of the girl. So, it shows how love has degenerated to something that is bodily and is no longer spiritual like it was in the uh, earlier days. Yes, that's why you have the Hyacinth Girl passage. And then from the Hyacinth Girl passage, he talks about um, a version, Wagner's version of Tristan and Isolde. This is again a romantic story of how Tristan and Isolde both are in love, and when one dies, the other also dies. One goes seafaring, I believe, and when Tristan dies, so Isolde also uh, kills herself. So the whole point is about how love in those days was, where it was not bodily, but it was in fact uh, an emotional connection or an emotional bonding with another person. But in the modern times, it is only something that is related to bodily attraction. And then he talks about a fortune teller. The fortune teller's name is Madame Sosostris. Yes, madam. This is yes, okay. So this is Madam Sosostris. So she talks about a Phoenician sailor who dies. I mean, this whole thing about the fortune teller is again about how um, it's basically tarot reading, and it again shows the hypocrisy of people. Now people are cheating other people. Now this lady genuinely doesn't know fortune telling, but still she acts as if she knows. So that's how people are again cheating other people for money during the modern times. The next is you have the rhyme London Bridge is falling down. So this is the nursery rhyme that's quoted in T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. So this could be a question again. And though I mean, he talks about London Bridge falling down because there are ghosts of dead people, and these ghosts of dead people are because of people who fought in the battlefield. So this is again because of the First World War, that there's a lot of death and destruction that has taken place, and all these people are roaming around like ghosts. Yes. And the most important lines, I'll go back to the poem and I'll give you the lines as well. Yes, and if you look at the last passage or the last stanza of the first section, Unreal City, the Unreal City here is a reference to London. And under the brown fog of a winter dawn, a crowd floated over London Bridge. So many, I had not thought, death had undone so many. So again, it is about it's about death because of the First World War. And of course, the first line is very important. April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. So, yes, again, if you look at this whole stanza, these are the various characters. This is the main crux of the various parts of the first section. Any doubts?
No.
No.
No, ma'am.
And the allusions are only of the nursery rhyme, which is again London Bridges falling down. The first is of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. So this is from Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. And of course, Tristan and Isolde is another allusion. And that's it. Shall we move on to the next section? So, burial of the dead
Yes.
is basically you're burying the dead person where there's no scope for regeneration. It's all done. There's no way in which you can undo things. So, that is the first section. You will also look at the progress that is being made by T.S. Eliot in terms of regeneration as well. The second section, a game of chess.
A game of chess.
Yes, the second section is a game of chess. This title is directly borrowed from Middleton's play, which is a game at chess. And of course, you have another illusion as well, which is women beware women. And this is also a play by Middleton, and this allusion is simply because it is about women. The whole of this section is about women. So therefore, that title is more apt. And this play, Women Beware Women, is about how a duke is trying to seduce the daughter-in-law of a lady, and the mother-in-law is engaged by the duke's minister in playing chess. And the movements of chess, or the positioning of the coins, is likened to the movements of uh, sex. So that is the reason why it is again titled a game of chess. So that's basically a scene from there. Now this section has two scenes. One is where you have who has exquisite furnishings, and another scene is about two women talking at a bar room in London. London bar room. Yes, the first section or the first scene that is about a woman who is in exquisite furnishings is again, the first line is from Antony and Cleopatra, where Shakespeare uses these lines to talk about Cleopatra. And yes, there's this woman who is amidst a lot of riches, and she is pulling her hair, she is combing her hair, and T.S. Eliot says that she is combing her hair with a lot of force, simply to show the frustration that the woman has in her life. She's actually not happy with the way in which her life is moving on. So that's why she is pulling her hair like that. And there's also this picture of a Philomela that's hanging there. So it actually talks about the myth of the nightingale. I don't know if you know the myth of the nightingale. The nightingale is,
Yeah,
yes,
the story behind the nightingales.
the nightingale
Right,
is
right.
actually believed to sing sad songs because initially Philomela, who was a pretty girl, she was raped by her sister's husband, and he cuts the tongue of Philomela just so that she doesn't reveal this to her sister. But yeah, somehow it happens. It's basically a myth that's associated with the nightingale, and it somehow happens that she is transformed into a nightingale, and she sings sad songs. That's why it is believed that a nightingale sings sad songs. And yes, and he talks about the myth that is associated with Philomela. And then the poem moves on to a bar scene. It's set in a bar room where two women, they're gossiping, and they're talking about another woman's private life. Yes. Do you know the name of the woman? Anybody? Sorry?
Lil.
Yes, Lil
Lil.
and yes, ma'am, Lil and
Lil.
the name of the man.
Lil's husband, I remember.
Anybody else? Have you read the poem, the others? or a summary.
I have listened before,
Albert,
but
right?
I don't
Yes,
know.
Lil
Albert.
and
Yes,
Albert.
Albert.
So Albert is basically a person who's working in the army, and he comes only once in a while to visit his wife. And they're talking about pregnancy and contraception because they've already had enough children. And this woman, she says that I had suggested her to take contraceptive pills, and that's the reason why she's become ugly right now. So they're discussing something that is private or something that's between a couple in a bar. So that again shows the moral degeneration of the modern society. Yes, and then you have the third section. The third section is the fire salmon. This is the longest section, and this is the section where we are introduced to Tiresias, who is a blind prophet. And Tiresias is also, a character in Sophocles' Oedipus Rex. Yes, so he is a character. He is the speaker, in fact, of the Wasteland, and he is by a desolate riverside, and this river is River Thames. So again, here he talks about degradation of the river. And you have the famous lines from Protalamion. Sweet Thames, run softly until I end my song. So the whole point of introducing Protalamion is to show how Thames during those days was a river that was pure and you could celebrate marriage. So it's basically a marriage song, Protalamion. So people celebrated marriage by the side of River Thames. But now with the modern society, what you find near River Thames is packets of contraceptive pills and all such things because women prostitutes, they stand by the riverside and bring men to the riverside, and they do all such things on the riverside. Now this again shows, the pollution of the river shows moral degradation as well as spiritual degeneration. Now, the river itself is polluted with a lot of packets. A lot of uh, pollution. Of course, the river gets polluted. And he likens this pollution of the river to spiritual and moral degradation of the modern man. Because earlier it was a place where you could summarize marriage, but now it's no longer the same. And here you also have the famous typist girl passage. So this typist girl scene is again about how I'll just pick up the poem because I'll read few lines to you from the typist girl passage. So the typist girl is also another important character in section 3. So you could be asked questions as to where this particular character is or things like that. And yeah, the last line I forgot to mention this earlier. The last line of the second section is from Hamlet, where Ophelia says, "Good night, ladies, good night, sweet ladies, good night, good night." So, this is a line from Ophelia, Hamlet, and the speaker of these lines in the play is Ophelia. Yes, and throughout he says uh, unreal city. The reference is London. Yes. Now the typist girl passage. At the violent hour when the eyes and back turn upward from the desk, when the human engine waits like a taxi throbbing waiting. Now this is again about how mechanical life has become. As soon as it is time, you raise upward from your desk, and he says the human engine waits. Now, he likens our life to a mechanical process where everything is extremely mechanical. I, Tiresias, though blind, throbbing between two lives, old man with wrinkled female breasts, can see at the violent hour, the evening hour that strikes homeward and brings the sailor home from the sea. Now it's the time when everybody is returning home. The sailor comes back home, so everybody is returning home. It's at that time that Tiresias is seeing something. The typist home at tea time clears the breakfast. So the typist has returned back from home, sorry, back from work now. She's come back home. She's cleaning her breakfast table, lights her stove, and lays out food in tins. Now, this whole reference of food in tins is again an indication of how people eat packed food and modern day. I mean, it's basically about modern lifestyle. Out of the window, perilously spread, her drying combinations touched by the sun's last rays. She has dried all her clothes, stockings, slippers, camisoles, and stays. I, Tiresias, old man with wrinkled dugs, perceived the scene and foretold the rest. I too awaited the expected guest. Now, this woman, after having finished all of this work, she is waiting for somebody's arrival. And that is the next line. He, carbuncular, arrives. Now, carbuncular is basically a person who has pimples. This is a man with pimples, and the fact that he has pimples indicates that he is an immoral person. Yes? A small house agent's clerk with one bold stare, one of the low on whom assurance sits as a silk hat on a Bradford millionaire. The time is now propitious. Now it's the time, it's the time for them, as he guesses. The meal is ended. She is bored and tired. Endeavors to engage her in caresses which still are unreproved. Now, this man is caressing the woman, the typist, but then there's no reaction from the typist girl. If undesired, flushed, and decided, he assaults at once. And yeah, she's not interested, but uh, yeah, I mean, yes. Now she's not able to reciprocate whatever she's not able to respond to everything that he is doing, but still they both have sexual intercourse, which is highly mechanical again. Exploring hands, encounter no defense. She's not restricting this person as well. And I, Tiresias, had foresuffered all, enacted on this same divan or bed. I who have sat by threads below the wall and walked among the lowest of the dead, bestows one final patronizing kiss and gropes his way, finding the stairs unlit. Now this man comes, they both have sex, and then he leaves. So that's again about how mechanical it is. And the next line is, it shows everything. She turns and looks at a moment in the glance, hardly aware of her departed lover. So she's just looking at the glass. There's just a blank look. There's no emotion from the woman. She smooths her hair with automatic hand and puts a record on the gramophone. So she again turns on the music. So this is the famous typist girl passage. So again, it shows about how people have become immoral, or how people have become. It's just all right to have sex with anybody, and it is all mechanical during the modern times. Now, moving on, the next section. Now, this is the longest section of the wasteland. Any doubts? The next is section 4. Section
No.
4 is death by water.
No,
This is
ma'am.
the shortest section. And of course, yeah, the fire sermon is from Buddha. I mean, this fire sermon is a sermon that was given by Buddha about desire and the ill effects of desire. What happens when people have desire, or he says that desire is the root cause for all miseries. And the fire sermon, more specifically, is about seductions and dealing with passions. Yes, the fourth section is again death by water. This is the shortest section of the wasteland. And here it is about prophecy. Initially, we had the tarot reading by Madame Sosostris, and she tells that there'll be one person, a sailor, will die by drowning. And here you have Cleobis, who is a Phoenician sailor, and he dies by drowning. And this death by water is actually an irony, because we're talking about wasteland where there's no rainfall, because only towards the end you find that there's rainfall. So this whole concept of death by water is itself an irony, where in the modern times, even if you want to die, there's no way out of the modern lifestyle or a way out of the modern society, because you're stuck in this whole circle where even if you want to die, there's no way, because there's no water in the wasteland. So this is again an irony that is employed by T.S. Eliot. So the first section and the fourth section, again it recurs in the fourth section, this whole uh, uh, foretelling of a Phoenician sailor's death by water by Madame Sosostris. And it also indicates of how death is the ultimate end, or the leveler. Death is a great leveler, because whoever you are, however vibrant you are in your life, obviously all people will have to die. And the next is the last in the final section, which is what the thunder said. And he says how people before the regeneration of Christ, people were living in spiritual darkness. He says even now people are in the same situation. They're living in utter darkness, like people were living before the time of Christ's regeneration or resurrection. And that they are living in a desert, as I told you, wasteland, with no water but only rock. So it shows how uncomfortable, or how life in the wasteland is. And he says that you can achieve peace only under the shadow of religion. So it is a shift back to religion, where he says you can achieve peace only by following a particular religion. And he asks people to have a quest for salvation and inner peace. Yes, and having said everything about the wasteland, everything that's negative about the wasteland, he says Datta Dayadvam. and Damyata, which is give, sympathize, and have self control. So these are the only ways in which you can attain salvation during the modern times. And it ends with Om Shanti Shanti, where it's just Shanti is peace. So he's again seeking peace, and that is a term from the Upanishads. And with that, it ends. And here in the last section, he talks about the journey of MMS, and it ends with hope because there's one way in which you can move out of this whole circle in the wasteland, and that is Datta, Daidvam, and Damyata. Give, sympathize, and have self control. So, these are ways in which you can move out of the wasteland. Yes, yes, ma'am. Here he talks about the journey of MMS. So
Amrita, what
that's
is this
again
last
another
part?
allusion.
Journey of
Like you have the
Inverness?
Spanish tragedy where he uses the subtitle Geronimo is mad again. And there's one river that's mentioned in this section, and that's Ganga. This could be another question because into his Koi Mistress, the river that's mentioned, what's the name? What are the names of the rivers that are mentioned? There are two rivers that are mentioned. Yes, please find out the names of rivers that are
Ganga
mentioned in
and Thames,
To
huh?
His Koi Mistress as well. Yes, with that we
Ganges?
finished the wasteland. Any doubts? And like I said, he began with the fact that there's no regeneration in the modern society where everything is buried already. But what the Thunder said about redemption, ways in which you can redeem yourselves, and also it is about regeneration. So he finally ends with hope. Any doubts? Clear?
No, no doubts.
Yes. So please go back and read the poem.
Yes.
Yes. Not Thames.
To his Koi Mistress, it is Humber and Ganges. Yes, I remember something with H and then suddenly I said Thames. Cha,
Yes. Any other
I don't
doubts?
know what will happen. No, thank you for that very brief yet detailed